Greetings, fellow Demon Slayers. This is Taimanin Mari here today with another Action Taimanin video. And today we're going to talk about the stat that no one knows anything about, and that's going to be crit rate. So first, let's pet the Emily, because she's going to be our example waifu today. And we're going to get right into it. So, the crit rate stat. Let's go over to Emily. Now, we're going to explain the stat, because no one knows how it works. I've known for a while, but I had to test the formula that I had to make sure that it actually worked, because there's no credible info from the developers in regards to really any of the systems. So the information that I had, I tested it, and after 600 hours of playtime, I think it's pretty accurate. Like, I'm pretty sure the crit percentage is about where the numbers add up to. So, when building a character towards critical, there's some math you have to do, and there's a number you have to remember. As you can see here, I have 10,992 crit. The magic number you should always aim for is 12,000 critical. Reason being, every 200 crit that you get is 1% crit rate. The crit stat does not increase crit damage, it only increases your chances of scoring a critical hit. So critical damage will have to be applied with other means. So, with that being said, we can just round up, say Emily has 11,000 crit, which would mean that her critical rate with just her crit stat is 55%. If it was 12,000, it would be 60%. Really simple once you know the number. Again, 200 crit is 1% crit rate. So, this video is going to outline how to break 80% crit and above. Of course, this depends on the gear you have access to. Jiggle. So we'll get into it using like a best in slot example in Emily's case. So now, we know we have 55% crit. So how are we going to jump to 90 plus? So moving on to her weapon. Of course you're going to need crit Magatama. Now, what you should be doing with your critical Magatama is making up that 12,000 gap. This is the only way you can fine tune it. So for every 1% critical rate roll you roll on the Magatama, assume that's another 200 critical, since it's 1% worth of crit. So looking at her Magas, the first one here has 1% and 1.2% critical rate for a total of 2.2. If we add that to our 55 crit rate, that is 57.2. Moving on to the next Magatama, we have a total of 1% crit rate. So now we're looking at 58.2. Moving on, we have two 1% rolls. So now we have 60.2 total critical. So right there, that additional 5.2% that we have from these three Magatamas makes up the 12,000 magic number, because it would be 200 times 5 for 1% per crit roll per 200. So basically 200 times 5 is 1,000. Divide 1,000 by 5, you get 200, and then 1% crit rate per 200. It's really like weird math, but that's how it works. So right now our Emily effectively has 12,000 crit stat because she has 60.2% crit. Moving on to the last Magatama, we have 1.0% and 1.1%. So, adding that to 60.2, we now have 62.3% crit. So, moving on. Our crit stat is effectively above 12,000, which means we broke that 60% magic number, and now we can start building into silly critical rate. So the next place we want to look for critical rate is our supporters. So you're going to need supporters like to break the threshold, so to speak. So we're going to just remove the point and just sit her at 62% crit, not 62.2, just for ease of math. So now we have here Spica. Spica's beautiful on Emily because Emily's axe scales off of melee, so this critical rate here affects her axe specifically. So now Emily's melee critical rate would be 76% if we apply this 14%. Obviously, you see the Faust here. So now we have a perfectly rounded out character. 76% critical rate for melee and both range, because we're simply adding the 14% to her already flat 62%. And then finally, we're using her Aegis Tackle steroid so that she can have 20% critical for 10 seconds every time she uses this ability. And with her max skills, as you can see here, her cooldown is max. Basically the cooldown of the skill is not much longer than the duration. So the uptime of this critical rate buff is about 90%, maybe a little more, meaning that she effectively, as long as you're using your Aegis Tackle, will have 96% crit, or 96.2% crit if you want to be exact. Or I think it was 0.3, but what have you. So then, now we can see how powerful this ability can get, because we all know that Axe hits super hard, but the issue in Action Taimanin is no one really knows how to make crit consistent until now. Well, with this loadout, her critical will be insanely consistent. And you don't even need Spica to reach these numbers. If you don't have Spica, you can simply grab a Renka, where you can see here, she gives 14% crit, so she would help you to reach that 76% threshold. And the only other thing we used to get there were Magatamas and an ability, which are easily accessible even for free-to-play. Obviously, your gear will play a role in your critical, but her super rare weapon, this one here, at max rank would have 28% crit, and even without it, it still has 14% crit. So keep in mind, there are ways to get your critical up without actually having like the latest gacha supporter or some OP gacha supporter that was around. You can definitely replace Spica with Renka for a critical build. You can definitely replace like a Tamari with a Magi MK2 for a critical build. Just try to get the S level on the Magi MK2 up so that she gets the 28% crit. And actually, if we were to max out the S level of this item, this 28% flat critical with the critical stat on the item would actually deal more critical hits than the Tamari, but at the cost of DPS, because the Tamari will have a higher base attack. So now that the math is out of the way, we're just going to do an example run. We'll throw Emily in the event. Actually, before doing so, let me make sure that her abilities are in order, because I do use her for PvP. Yeah, she's all good. So, we'll bring her here, and we'll just kind of watch her attacks, see how often she criticals, and then that'll be the video. What the heck? Okay. So I'm going to kind of be lax so you can just see the stream of orange numbers that her basic attack will spout off. Of course, we want to Aegis Tackle, and as you can see here, it's mostly orange. She's easily stacking the debuff on Tamari with little effort, and I haven't even bothered to, like, say, throw an axe. Look, 64,000 on the consecutive hits. The mobs that she hit didn't even survive to see the final hit of the axe. Let me Aegis Tackle again. And this is pretty much what you do. Like, this applies to so many characters. Shiranui has a crit steroid, so you could use it on her. Kurenai is known for her crit steroid. I believe Sakura and Asagi may have one. I don't remember. But the really big offenders that this would work for would be characters like Emily and Kurenai. And as you can see, she just had like a 150k crit. Every time the axis popped off, it's criticaled. And this is like really how you make crit consistent. Like, it's not always gonna crit. Like, even at 96%, you'll still see like streams of white sometimes because RNG is weird. And 96% total doesn't always mean 96%. But this guy is like, I'm literally just basic attacking. I'm not doing anything. And right now, I didn't even pop Aegis Tackle, and the crit is still respectable. Okay, so let me just axe. Dawdled around enough. And that axe obviously crit because it deleted whatever health he had left. And yeah, if you really wanted to like blow the boss up, you could like Spica active, you could ult. I just wanted you guys to see an example of like just how much damage her basic attacks alone can add up to. So just dodging around like an idiot, she still was really critting a lot and pumping out a lot of DPS, and I even forgot to Aegis tackle there for a time, and the crits were still rather consistent. So that's pretty much it. Remember guys, every 200 crit is 1% crit rate, but it does not give more crit damage. So for crit damage, we go back to the Magatamas. As you can see here, they have critical damage rolls. My rule of thumb for Magatama is once you're effectively at 12,000 crit or 60% crit, then what you want to do is fill the remaining slots with critical damage. So we were at 62%, so I actually went over with my Magatamas when doing my math. And then every other slot there is like just critical damage. That's why you see like in the example of this guy, I realized I was effectively at 12,000, so then I just focused critical damage rolls, whereas each other Magatama has 2 crit rate rolls. So keep that in mind. Your Magatamas are very important. They will make up whatever like difference you have, and then from there, once you hit the 60% threshold, our 12,000 effective crit stat, you can go crazy with your supporters. Homura also helps since she increases all damage by 30%. Obviously that applies to your critical damage because it's every form of damage goes up by 30%. Spica helps because she increases range damage. Her mixed with Homura would mean your critical ranged attacks do 58% more, which is how my Emily is able to basic crit for 2200, even though her basic attacks are known for being really weak. Now, I've reviewed this build with other users. This isn't something I just like came up with and I'm saying this is law. They ask about the low attack stat. After a certain point, when you have so much crit and crit damage, the attack would actually become diminishing returns. In a build like this, Homura is enough. Like, even if you don't have Spica, Homura is more than enough damage. You don't need to really stack like much damage with a build like this because your Magas are taking care of you with crit damage, and your Homura is taking care of you with all damage. Outside of that, we do have red Magatamas in the sidearm, but you can even further abuse your crit rate by just throwing yellow Magas here. It's totally up to you. I fluffed my damage to get it over 7k, because you can see it's just barely breaking 7,000. That is with these red Magatamas. If I take them off, she would fall like below 7k, or like really close to like 6,999. Like it'd be a little too low. So that's the build. That's the crit explanation. You can apply this to anyone. As you can see, looking at Shiranui, she has the same basic setup, just with Renka, because she's predominantly melee. And if I ever wanted to use Shiranui, I would just give her the Spica back, since she is my main. And this can also be applied with any other character who has a crit steroid. Biggest offenders, again, are Kurenai and Emily. Shiranui, it works, but because Shiranui doesn't have a rapid rate of attack with her abilities, it doesn't seem as powerful as on Emily or Kurenai, but Emily also has a really big critical steroid tied to her projectile. So, I hope this clears up the whole crit debate. I hope this helps people to understand how to abuse the stat in this game, because I see so many people not knowing what crit does still to this day, and I know I've taken a while to release this information, but it wasn't from a credible source. I had to test it. It does seem to line up number-wise, and I played Emily as proof so you could see how often she really does crit. Now, if some sort of information comes out that debunks this from the devs, then that would be great, because then we'd finally have solid information. But until then, use this as your rule of thumb, as this is what I use in all of my critical builds, and it has helped me to finally enjoy critical rate and action Taimanin. Finally, video's over. Okay, that was a mouthful. If you guys found it helpful or informative, please like and subscribe, as it really does help out the channel and helps me towards becoming a full-time YouTuber. With that, you boys and gals take care. Have a great rest of your day. You have good luck in your gotchas or in the arena. And I'll catch you guys tomorrow with another video. Bye-bye.